It is Thursday, November 18th here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to the Week 11 Preview Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schauf. With me, as always, is Jared Smolin. I feel like I've threatened it plenty of times before, Jared, but this might be the time, the first week where I actually don't finish the Thursday night game. We got New England Patriots at the Atlanta Falcons. We got Patriots as 6.5-point favorites, which I don't know, seems a little bit unfair, but it's coming off a good game for Mac Jones, and we'll get to that in a minute. It's up 2.5 from where it opened, so I guess the bettors like the Patriots side of that. Over under 47 here. Patriots did just hang 45 points on the Browns. It's the second time in 4 games that they've scored 45 plus and racked up at least 450 total yards. So I don't know. What do you expect from this?
And it's a good matchup too, right? I mean, Atlanta 30th in Football Outsiders pass defense, DVOA, 22nd against the run. Mac Jones has finished as a top 12 quarterback in 2 of his last 4 games now. He's been 25th and 28th in the other 2. I think he's going to have success here tonight. The question is just, how much do they need him? Because we know New England wants to be a run-heavy offense. They're 29th in situation-neutral pass rate over the last 4 weeks. Jones falls short of like quarterback 1 spot start value to me. I do think he's a nice quarterback 2, because again, I do think when he does throw, he's going to have success. I'd be surprised if he has to throw it more than like 30 times tonight.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even bet on him getting 230 pass attempts, unless the Falcons are ready to put up more of a fight in this game. He's coming off 19 for 23 passing last week, 3 touchdowns. So it's the most efficient game that he has had this year. Great game. And he's a good bet to play well in this one. But for fantasy purposes, it was the first time this year that Mac Jones has hit 3 touchdowns. It's just the 4th game in 10 weeks that he has thrown multiple touchdown passes. He's averaging 1.3 touchdowns per game. It followed a 139-1 passing game against Carolina, a 217-0 against the Chargers the week before. So, there's upside in like a super flex, 2 QB, even deeper 1 quarterback leagues. But don't overrate Mac Jones based on recency bias.
Yeah, that he's been top 12 in 2 of the last 4 weeks, but those are his only top 12 finishes of the season so far. He's been much better in real life than fantasy.
And that other game was when they just scored a ridiculous number of points against the Jets. Everybody got into the end zone that game.
Yep.
The Pats have attempted 41 total passes in victories over the past 2 weeks. So especially if you trust that line for tonight, that 6.5-point line, and expect them to control this game, that's only going to push them more toward the running game. So we'll talk about the backs in a second, but I'm not like Hunter Henry, Jacoby Myers are in play, but I don't think either one of those guys is exciting. And I'm not looking anywhere else here for sneaky pass catching value.
And did you know Kendrick Bourne has outscored Jacoby Myers in 4 straight games now?
It doesn't shock me.
Yeah, he's been the efficiency has been carrying Bourne. He's been catching a high rate of his targets and averaging a bunch of yards per catch. I still wouldn't trust him, but Myers, finally scored last week, but he's 57th among wide receivers in expected fantasy points over the last 4 weeks, largely because New England hasn't been throwing it a whole lot. So Myers is a fringe fantasy option despite the good matchup here. Hunter Henry, I do think Jonnu Smith's status matters for Hunter Henry, and Smith is listed as questionable. So we'll see if Jonnu Smith ends up active tonight.
It certainly can't hurt. I think Kendrick Bourne is also tied with Devontae Smith in targets over that same span. So just for a little context, that backfield though, I think is the most interesting part here. Of course, Ramondre Stevenson coming off a big game. Damian Harris is back though. So Stevenson's going to look tempting. Damian Harris, I think, is still the better bet for more touches, but how do you break down this backfield for the Atlanta game?
Yeah, we're just guessing at how Belichick's going to deploy these guys. I do think it's worth noting that even prior to last week and the 2 games before that, Ramondre Stevenson had 18 carries and 4 targets. He was mixing in already. Now Damian Harris had 38 carries over those 2 games, along with 2 targets. I think you could see that type of split tonight, and there should be plenty of carries to go around for both of these guys. You could see the Patriots running backs combined for like 30 carries tonight, but it could be 16, 17 carries for Damian Harris, but 10 for Ramondre Stevenson. But it does seem like they like Stevenson more than Harris in the passing game. And Brandon Bolden is listed as questionable. I think he's going to play. But if Bolden was inactive, that would open up some passing game work probably for Stevenson. So I'm with you. Harris is the better play. But I think Stevenson is in the mix as a running back 3 or flex play tonight.
Yeah, and I say Harris the better play just because I think he's the better bet to lead Stevenson in carries. I certainly wouldn't be shocked if Stevenson outscored Harris in this game. You mentioned the carries for the past couple games. Week 8, or what was it, week 8? Yes, week 8 would have been 2 games ago before Harris missed last week's game. 23 carries for Harris, 8 for Stevenson in that one, 4 for Bolden. Week 9 at Carolina, 15 carries for Harris, 10 for Stevenson, 8 for Bolden. Of course, Harris and Stevenson both came away from that game with concussions, but each guy was in the game until the second to last possession for New England. So I don't think anybody really got a boost for the other not playing. I guess at this point, that's the key to keep in mind is we're all guessing. The second that we think we know what the Patriots are going to do is when we get it absolutely wrong. And he throws out somebody that had no business getting any touches the week before to lead things. So it's going to be a J.J. Taylor game here is basically what I'm saying. But, I would have to guess that we're somewhere closer to that 15-10 of week 9 than the 23-8 from week 8. Just a guess.
That's what I'm thinking too. And it makes it easier to start both these guys with the, Patriots as a touchdown favorite. Atlanta 29th in adjusted points allowed to running back. So again, but both Harris and Stevenson can definitely have nice fantasy games tonight.
And certainly no Bolden unless you're desperate because he's basically J.D. McKissick without the target upside.
Yes.
Atlanta side, Cordero Patterson is a game time decision with the ankle sprain. And that to me is good news. Even if he doesn't play, I kind of hope he doesn't play because we were wondering last week if he was going to miss multiple games, if he had a high ankle sprain. Now he's at least questionable for this one. Game time decision. We'll see if he plays. And I mean, the question, if he is active, is going to be, do I play him or not? And this is the kind of question we don't know any better than you, because I don't know how his ankle feels. I don't know how likely he is to tweak it. I think that if you're a game time decision with an ankle injury, you're definitely at an elevated risk to tweak that at any point. Now, it could be your first touch of the game. It could be the fourth quarter. I don't know. So you're going to have to weigh that risk and decide whether you're willing to take a shot on Patterson in your lineup.
Yeah, man, I'm hoping he's inactive because, one, I don't want him to aggravate it and miss more time. Two, I don't want to have to decide whether to start Cordero or Patterson or not. Dr. Chow, based on video of the injury, seems pretty convinced that it's a high ankle sprain. He called it a mild high ankle sprain, but even in that case, I'd be surprised if a guy's ready to play 4 days after suffering that injury, which often costs guys multiple weeks. So I'm expecting Patterson to be inactive. We'll find out around 7:00. If Patterson is out, and it's going to be Mike Davis and Wayne Gallman. Gallman, finished with way more touches last week. Arthur Smith basically said after the game that was because of the scoreboard, because they knew they had this Thursday night game coming up. So I think Gallman's going to be involved, but I think if you're picking between those two, and hopefully you're not, because I don't think either is a great play, but I expect Davis to lead the backfield in touches tonight.
I mean, we have to take him at his word, but Wayne Gallman's first carry came in the first quarter of that game. So he was definitely more of the game plan heading into that one than at any point previous. 15 carries to 4 apiece for Mike Davis and Cordero Patterson. I mean, I don't know. If I'm a Falcons coach, why not give Wayne Gallman the ball again and have it at least be like a Damian Harris, Ramondre Stevenson kind of split here? Because Mike Davis has given us not a whole lot this year.
No, yeah, you're right that Gallman was involved from the start. And that's why, again, I think he's going to be involved tonight. I would just, and maybe it's close to a 50-50 split. If I'm picking between the two, it'd be Davis.
Yes, I agree with that. We have to take the coach at his word. I mean, a couple games ago, we had barely any touches for Mike Davis. And then Arthur Smith said afterward, we're going to get him the ball more going forward. The next game, he was back to his normal level of usage. So take him at his word. We'll take Mike Davis first. Hopefully you don't have to use either guy, but that's the way to break it down. Otherwise, on the Falcons offense, I mean, it's just Kyle Pitts, really. Matt Ryan has gone over the past 3 games, awful, terrific, awful. So I'm going to go ahead and bet on the outside rather than the filling of that, terrific sandwich.
Yeah, tough matchup for Ryan. Just it would make sense to me that he's going to struggle without Calvin Ridley, and especially if Cordero Patterson's out. Like, it's Kyle Pitts and not much else New England has to worry about. So I would definitely not want to use Ryan tonight. And yeah, Pitts, I mean, he's been disappointing without Calvin Ridley. I do think he's struggling a bit with like the increased defensive attention, but the volume's been good enough where, he, at tight end, you'd have to have another, top 5 guy to sit Kyle Pitts tonight.
Mm-hmm. And before we get out of this game, here's an interesting one. Half PPR scoring. Nikki Banks from YouTube says Ramondre Stevenson or Deontay Foreman this week. Who you got, Jared?
I'd go Stevenson. And I wish we knew if McNichols was going to be out, because if he is out, I'd probably lean towards Foreman. I just don't think Foreman's going to do enough in the passing game where I think Stevenson will tonight.
Yeah, we haven't ever seen the receiving side from Foreman, so I'm not going to expect much from there. And I think that the Patriots want to run the ball a lot. I think they'll be able to run the ball a lot. I think there will be carries and targets available for both guys. So yeah, Stevenson was my answer as well. Baltimore at Chicago. The Ravens by 6 at open. That's down to primarily 4.5 right now. It kind of varies depending on where you're looking. Over under 45.5. So not a whole lot of fantasy goodness to mine here. Lamar Jackson, speaking of lacking fantasy goodness, coming off probably his worst game of the year at Miami last Thursday night. I'm not going to worry about that too much with him, though. Still managed a QB 10 finish for the week in a down week for scoring, and that followed QB 1 and QB 6 finishes in fantasy. The Ravens have been throwing the ball more lately. They're 13th in neutral pass rate for the season, according to rbsdm.com. And they trail only Cleveland in EPA per play on dropbacks. A lot of that comes down to Lamar Jackson running on his dropbacks, but, that's why we love him.
Yeah, and Baltimore's 8th in situation neutral pass rate over the last 4 weeks, so they're only moving more in that direction. I'll be curious to see, because what Miami did on Thursday night was they just blitzed the hell out of Lamar Jackson. Miami blitzed on 60% of Jackson's dropbacks. So I'll be curious to see if Chicago uses that as a blueprint and does the same thing, and then how the Ravens respond to that. But yeah, you're starting Lamar here, obviously. Marquise Brown locked in. Rashad Bateman, with Sammy Watkins back last week, Bateman's playing time and his route rate, it did sink, but he still saw 8 targets in that game. Sammy Watkins sucked. Rashad Bateman was good again. I would not be surprised if they go back to Bateman and closer to a full-time role. So I do still like Bateman as a wide receiver 3 play this week.
Yeah, and he tied Mark Andrews for second on the team in targets against Miami, even in, a little bit less playing time. 18.6% target share for that game. That was actually Bateman's smallest share in his 4 games yet. So plenty to like about his role even there. Devin Duvernay was the number 2 wideout for Baltimore in playing time against Miami. I would guess from this point that it was kind of a matchup thing. We've talked about Miami being exploitable in the slot before, and Duvernay has been playing more in the slot lately. So it would make sense for him to get a bit more playing time in that one if they like him in the slot and the other guys outside. It was his second highest snap share of the season. The only game that Duvernay has had higher than that one was week 5 against Indy. That was the game before Rashad Bateman rejoined the team and a game that Sammy Watkins left early.
Yeah, I think Watkins probably either wasn't ready for a big role coming off the hamstring, or they didn't want him in a big role, or he just wasn't good in that game. So maybe they just decided to sit him for much of the second half. But again, yeah, I do think Bateman just looks good and he's produced, and Lamar obviously likes throwing to him. He's getting targeted on a high percentage of his routes. So I think the arrow's still trending up for Rashad Bateman.
Yeah, and then going back to the blitz-heavy game plan, I think that we always tend to say when we see a game like that, they might have figured it out. Let's see if the next defense does the same thing. Well, Baltimore knows what happens in that game too. They're going to be reviewing the tape. They're probably going to have a plan for this game if they get another blitz-heavy attack. So I don't think either of us is betting against Lamar Jackson or the Ravens in general. It will be interesting to see if Chicago tries to go with more of that. Marquise Brown, by the way, we talked about the passing volume. He has certainly been benefiting from that. His efficiency has come way down. Early in the season, he was exorbitantly efficient on, less than exciting touch counts or target counts. Now his targets are way up though. 12 plus targets in 3 straight games, 10 plus in 4 of his past 5. His efficiency's down. So I think we can kind of balance that out. Probably the targets aren't going to stay quite up where they are, but the efficiency is probably going to rebound a little bit.
Yeah, Brown is 3rd among wide receivers in expected fantasy points per game over the last 4 weeks. He has a 34% target share in his last 3 games. So he is locked in as a wide receiver 1 going forward, I think.
And that's after I traded him away for Calvin Ridley. So you're welcome, everybody who has Marquise Brown right now. The backfield looks like it'll get Latavius Murray back. He was limited in practice Wednesday, and they released Le'Veon Bell, and that suggests to me they expect Latavius Murray to play in this game. I still think Levante. I'm just going to lump them all together and make one player. Devontae Freeman, I think, deserves to be the top guy in touches still. He's got a higher rushing DVOA on the season than Latavius Murray. 9th among 52 running backs in that category with at least 15 carries, but fewer than 80 carries on the season. Murray's been okay in that area as well. 17th in that group, but still not quite at the level of Freeman. And Devontae Freeman also has a positive receiving DVOA. So he's been better than Latavius Murray in both of those areas, as well as PFF elusive rating.
And this will be Murray's first game back too off a high ankle sprain. He was out 3 or 4 weeks. So I'd be surprised if he's back in the lead role. I think Murray probably just steps into the role Le'Veon Bell was playing, and Devontae Freeman. Now Freeman's played 58% of the snaps exactly in each of the last 2 games. I that kind of be my projection for this week. I think he's a decent running back 3 or flex play.
Mm-hmm. On the Bears side, David Montgomery reclaimed his workhorse role, played 85% of the snaps against Pittsburgh last time out, 13 carries, 2 targets to 4 carries and 0 for Khalil Herbert, who played just 10 snaps in that game. So David Montgomery is back to, being useful. The offense, meanwhile, it seems to be getting better. Justin Fields has certainly looked much better his last 2 times out. Not to the point where I'm interested in using him outside of 2 quarterback and super flex leagues, but it does at least look better than Teddy Bridgewater, who's somebody I've been playing over Justin Fields in a super flex league. A 2 quarterback league to this point, really.
Yeah, Fields is second in PFF passing grade over his last 2 outings. He's completed 64% of his passes, averaged 8.3 yards per attempt. And I think most importantly, the rushing has started to come. 10 carries for 103 yards and a score 2 games ago, 8 carries, 45 yards in that game against the Steelers. The reason this matchup is so interesting, though, is because, where Fields has struggled this season is against the blitz. Remember that game against the Bucs? The Bucs blitzed them 44% of the time in that game. He's been blitzed just 32% of the time and 28% of the time over his last 2 games where he's had success. The Ravens are one of the blitz heaviest defenses in the NFL. So that to me is why it's still wait and see on Justin Fields in 1 quarterback leagues. But if he delivers in this matchup, then I think, we can start to consider him as, a lower end quarterback 1 the rest of the season.
Of course, we have to wonder, too, if Pittsburgh laid out the blueprint of beating Fields by hitting him late and expecting the refs not to call it.
Yeah, maybe.
Darnell Mooney, I think, remains the better bet than Allen Robinson. Neither guy has reached 70 yards in a game since week 4, so I would prefer to not play either one. Robinson, of course, has yet to get to that number in any week.
And Robinson didn't practice on Wednesday. I think it's with a hamstring, which is concerning coming off the bye week. I mean, maybe it's just a day off for the veteran, but that's definitely worth keeping an eye on.
I think it's probably out with melancholy based on how this year has gone for him to this point.
Yeah.
Cole Kmet gets the best matchup among Bears skill position players in this one against Baltimore. Ravens allowed the 3rd most PPR points per game to tight ends so far, 6th friendliest matchup for the position according to our adjusted fantasy points allowed.
Yeah, Kmet has averaged 6.3 targets over his last 4 games, and he's 11th among tight ends in our expected fantasy points per game over the last 4 weeks. So he's been getting low end tight end 1 usage, and like you said, the matchup is good here. So I think Kmet is a nice spot start option this week.
I was just looking at our tight end rankings before the show, and from like 9 to 14, the guys look exactly the same. Like it looks like a group that you would bring into a police lineup to have somebody pick out, who was the one who stole their bread.
But it's not as ugly at tight end this year as it has been. Yeah, a lot of these weeks we get down to like tight end 16, and I'm not excited about the guy, but it's like, okay, this guy, he's probably not going to get me a 0, which is more than you can say for the past few seasons at tight end.
Yeah, I was looking at the group because of Zach Ertz, and he's 14th, and I was looking at that and thinking I'm okay with Zach Ertz, and I'm not sure I would jump him ahead of any of the guys in front of him. But we'll talk about more of those players as we get to the other games. In fact, one of them is in this next game: Green Bay Packers at Minnesota Vikings. Packers by 2.5 here, over under 49.5. And I mean, the big story is no Aaron Jones. He's got a knee sprain, and it comes in the same week as Cooper Kupp's bye. So my main event team is crying over this one, but it's possible we only lose Aaron Jones for 1 game.
Possible. Yeah. The timeline we've gotten is 1 to 2 weeks, but Green Bay has a week 13 bye. So, Jones could miss 2 games, get the bye and come back probably close to 100% in week 14. So I think that's most likely. And I think AJ Dillon is a running back 1 while Jones is out. I mean, I feel very confident that he's going to dominate the running back carries. And, Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon have combined to average 22 carries per game this season. So I think you could get Dillon up around 20 carries. The question is how much passing game work he'll get. Dillon averaging 1.8 targets per game this season, but Aaron Jones leads behind 4.7. Dillon's not going to get all that. I think Devontae Adams is probably a winner here. Not that he needs any help, but I think he probably gets even bigger target share with Jones out. But I do expect Dillon to pick up an extra target or 2 per game. So maybe 3 or 4 targets while Jones is out. So again, good matchup here too against the Vikings. I think Dillon is like a top 10 running back play this week.
Yeah, I agree. He's at least averaging 1.8 targets more per game than he was in his final season at Boston College. So
that's right.
Yeah, I like him this week. Like him as long as Aaron Jones is out. I mean, he would be in play next week, even if Aaron Jones comes back for that game. I think. But we'll deal with Aaron Jones being out for now. Aaron Rodgers also didn't practice Wednesday, listed with the toe issue. He was listed with that last week. I believe it was Saturday that he came off the COVID list, so they just like added him to the injury report. There was no game status, so it doesn't seem worrisome. But the fact that he didn't practice Wednesday says there's at least something there.
Yeah, he talked to reporters on Wednesday, and he didn't seem concerned. He was like, "Oh, it was nice to get a day off and do some rehab." So it's probably something. I don't expect it to keep him out of this game, though. Tougher matchup for Aaron Rodgers, who has really struggled against Mike Zimmer's Vikings historically to begin with, and Minnesota's just been pretty good against the pass this season, better than I would have expected them to be. They're sixth in Football Outsiders pass defense, DVOA. They're getting Harrison Smith back this week. It looks like Patrick Peterson might be back, so the defense is getting healthier. And Rodgers he's a low end quarterback one, which is really what he's been all season. I think he remains that this week.
Yeah, he's one spot ahead of Joe Burrow in our rankings right now. I think I'd probably lean Joe Burrow over Aaron Rodgers. I could see, I don't know, it's Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, Ryan Tannehill. It's tough for me to sort those guys because I think any of them could outscore the rest of the group. I'd probably lean Rodgers, assuming that toe is not an issue by the end of the week. And, we'll see what he says on the Pat McAfee show about how his toe is going.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you. I would use Burrow over Rodgers. We can make that change in the rankings.
Sweet. But Rodgers did torch the Vikings in both meetings last year. 7 total touchdown passes. That was about the worst Vikings defense that we've seen at any point since Mike Zimmer took over that team. This one, you said Harrison Smith's coming back. I think Anthony Barr is probably going to play in this game, but the Vikings are still lacking some pass rush, and I think that's especially worrisome when you have Aaron Rodgers coming to town. So, yeah, I would play Aaron Rodgers over most of those guys that I said, but, kind of packed in that group. And, you mentioned that maybe Davante Adams is a target winner here. There should be targets available without Aaron Jones, but it's tough for me to point to who gets them besides Davante Adams. So I think ultimately I'm not looking at any Packers as sneaky wide receiver plays this week.
Yeah, the pass route rates last week for the other wide receivers, Randall Cobb was next behind Davante Adams at 72%. They had Marquez Valdes-Scantling at 70% and Allen Lazard at 63%. So they were basically, three guys rotating for 2 spots behind Adams. So until that clears up, I don't think you can trust any of those guys.
Yeah, it's like the Titans backfield of wide receiver situations. On the Vikings side, it's all the usuals. It's another positive matchup for Tyler Conklin, who I was talking about in that mix of tight ends. Packers are 9th most friendly to the position by our adjusted fantasy points allowed. If we played Tyler Conklin last week, we definitely got lucky. Caught 3 balls for 11 yards. 2 of them were touchdowns, but 13th among tight ends in expected fantasy points over the past 4 weeks, 16.2% target share, which is solid for a tight end over Minnesota's past 4 games.
Yeah, the targets have come up for Conklin, 5, 7, 7, and 5 over the last 4 games. Now it's kind of as KJ Osborne has been, filtered out of the offense. Conklin's sort of taken over as the clear number 3 option in this passing game. So I do think, again, in the positive matchup, like you mentioned, that Conklin is a nice spot start option this week. I'd play him slightly over Cole Kmet. I just like the upside a bit more in this offense.
Yes, I agree with that. Anything else worth discussing on the Minnesota side?
Kirk Cousins, he's PFF's top graded passer through 10 weeks. He's just playing really well. His last 4 fantasy finishes have been quarterback 2 and quarterback 21, but then quarterback 6 and quarterback 6. Green Bay, though, their defense has been a lot better lately. They're up to 8th in Football Outsiders pass defense, DVOA, 7th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterback. So not a great matchup for Cousins. Again, I think he's playing well enough. And when you have Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, I think he's in that low end quarterback 1 mix this week.
Yeah, the Chargers weren't an awesome matchup for him last week either. He fared fine in that one. So, yeah, he's just in that, QB 10 to 12, 13 mix, and he definitely could outscore the rest of the group around him. If I have Kirk Cousins, I'm not looking for somebody to start over him. If you have Kirk Cousins and like Aaron Rodgers or Ryan Tannehill on your roster, the answer to who do I start is really like flip a coin.
Yes.
Miami Dolphins at the New York Jets. Dolphins by 3.5, over under 45. Jared, 6 straight Jets games have gone over in terms of total points, but now they run into the Dolphins, who have had 3 straight games go under and 4 of their past 5 go under. So I guess we'll see what prevails here with a modest line of 45 total points. We do have Tua Tagovailoa back, who kind of came back by force last week after Jacoby Brissett got knocked out of that game. Of course, he outperformed Brissett in that one. Didn't really favor any individual target, though, in his passing.
And the whole situation is weird that, like, Tua was healthy enough to play and played pretty well when he came in for Brissett, but, they weren't starting him. So strange there. I think the finger is still worth watching. Tua was limited on Wednesday. I'd like to see him get in a full workout either on Thursday or Friday to feel really good about using him. But the matchup here is obviously awesome. You talked about all those Jets games going over. That's because they've been giving up 40 plus points every game. They're dead last in Football Outsiders pass defense DVOA, 31st in adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks. And Tua had he's had two easy matchups this season: Jacksonville and Atlanta. He went 329 yards and 2 touchdowns versus Jacksonville, 291 yards and 4 touchdowns versus Atlanta. So he's proven capable of capitalizing on these good matchups.
Yeah, he's not in QB1 range, but it wouldn't be shocking to see him score in QB1 range. Mentioned he spread the targets around when he did come in, 4 apiece for Albert Wilson and Mike Gesicki. One of those was wiped out by a penalty, so it looks like 3 for Gesicki, 3 for Waddle, 2 for Myles Gaskin. I think Waddle, Gesicki, Myles Gaskin, all solid to good plays in this matchup against the Jets. Gaskin especially gets a Jets defense that has allowed 5 more running back rushing scores than any other defense in the league, along with 3 receiving scores.
Yeah, best matchup for opposing backs. Gaskin has averaged 2.8 yards per carry over the last 4 weeks. Like, this Dolphins running game is just horrible. Maybe he averages, 3.5 yards per carry this week, but if he's going to get 15 carries, that's fine. He's still doing a lot in the passing game.
Use him here and then trade him quickly. Albert Wilson, by the way, I mentioned he showed up for usage last week, but it was the first time that he has topped 33% playing time since week 3. So I wouldn't consider him a thing in most fantasy formats. Will Fuller, also apparently not ready to be a thing. He's still dealing with the worst finger injury of all time.
Yeah, I guess so. It's still a concentrated offense with Waddle and Gesicki. So I think you're starting both those guys and then no one else outside of Gaskin.
Mm-hmm. When's Devontae Parker eligible to come back?
I think this is his last week on IR. We'll see if he's actually ready to come back.
On the Jets side, it's QB number 3 of the year. Mike White has gone from being the next Kirk Cousins to the next Nathan Peterman. So that means Joe Flacco gets a turn now. Probably bad news for the running back target shares, really, because Flacco in his career has tended to be a deeper A-dot passer. We've had exorbitantly high target counts for Jets running backs. Michael Carter is still certainly in play in RB2 range, but I think it's time to wait and see on Ty Johnson.
Yeah, Mike White was again like 40% of his passes to running backs last week. Amazing how consistent he's been there. Carter, he's losing more passing down stuff to Ty Johnson over the past couple of weeks, but he's still getting 15 or so carries per game. Miami's defense has improved. They're up to 14th in Football Outsiders run D, so Carter's okay. I'm not excited about him. I definitely do think the move from White to Flacco hurts Michael Carter.
Yeah, definitely hurts the running back target shares there. And at wide receiver, Corey Davis, Jamison Crowder were the clear leaders in playing time last week, more so than what the targets would say. 84% for Davis, 83% for Crowder. Elijah Moore third at 56%. He was actually closer to Keelan Cole in playing time than he was to Davis and Crowder. Targets, like I said, more spread around. 7 for Corey Davis, 6 for Cole and Moore, 5 for Crowder. Crowder's the one among these guys who has actually played with Joe Flacco before with the Jets last year. Got 29 targets over Flacco's 4 starts.
Yeah, man, I love Elijah Moore. I still think he's very good, but his production has been so fluky these past. Even last week, the touchdown came in complete garbage time. I think it was their last drive of the game after Flacco came in. Elijah Moore's 51st among wide receivers and expected fantasy points per game over the last 4 weeks. I still don't think you can trust him until that playing time, and basically until Keelan Cole goes away and Moore is something close to a full-time player.
Yeah, I agree with that. If you need him, then cool. We know the upside's there from a talent standpoint, but otherwise, yep. Davis, Crowder look like better bets to get the target volume. Anything else from this game?
No.
All right. New Orleans at Philadelphia, Eagles by 2. It opened as a pick'em, over under a 43.5. So don't expect a whole lot of fantasy stuff here, but maybe we should expect more from Trevor Siemian than what we've gotten lately, huh? It seems like he's been a bigger fantasy factor than we thought.
Quarterback 10 and quarterback 4 in fantasy points last week. I couldn't believe it when I saw that. He's been he's been good enough to keep Taysom Hill off the field, which is kind of the biggest fantasy impact here. I think I'm still not using Trevor Siemian outside of 2 quarterback leagues, but he actually has been decent through these first 2 starts.
Yeah, certainly part of his fantasy finish last week was scoring being down at the position. I think that scoring 21 points got you into like the top 8 or maybe even 6 last week. Not using Trevor Siemian this week if I can help it. Also not using any of the Saints pass catchers if I can help it. But if I need to reach down into wide receiver 4 range, Traquan Smith, Deontay Harris are in play, more so Traquan Smith. And if you look at just the numbers, Deontay Harris's targets lately suggest that he's a better bet. Both he and Traquan Smith have been spending time in the slot, but Traquan Smith is the much better bet to be on the field at any given point. Harris is playing around 40% or even less of snaps. Smith is up to 80% and 91% playing time the past 2 weeks. He's also got an average depth of target that's 1.5 yards shorter than Deontay Harris's. So you tend to look at Traquan Smith and think downfield guy, but he's spending a lot of time in the slot right now and seeing moderate routes in terms of how deep they're going. That could make him an attractive target for Trevor Siemian, especially if the Saints fall behind in this game.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a shock that Traquan's role has grown here. I mean, before he dealt with all the injuries in the summer, I would have guessed that he would have been the most productive Saints wide receiver, with Michael Thomas out. So I think Traquan's just finally healthy now, and he's stepping into that number 1 receiver role. I think in this offense, he's run a route on 91 and 93% of the dropbacks over the last 2 weeks. So I do think he is in play as like a wide receiver 4. Still just tough to get excited about any part of this Saints passing game. Besides my guy Adam Troutman, continues to run a ton of routes, continues to see nice targets. Good matchup here against Philly. Philly 29th in adjusted points allowed to tight ends, dead last in Football Outsiders tight end coverage rankings. Troutman below Cole Kmet, below CJ Uzoma. I'm trying to think who else is down there, but he's in the mix if you're desperate at tight end. I'll say that much about Troutman.
Hey, how can you not get excited about Baby Witten in a 30 pass attempt offense?
Exactly.
Alvin Kamara limited practice Wednesday, so that gives some hope that he returns for us this week. I mean, you're obviously playing Alvin Kamara if he's active. We're going to have to watch the situation with his knee this week. I think Mark Ingram is still in play, at least in RB3 range, even if Alvin Kamara is back, though. There's still, the chance that they limit Alvin Kamara some versus his usual touch count.
Yeah, I think Ingram would be in the Ramondre Stevenson kind of tier, expecting 10 to 12 touches if Kamara's back.
Yes, I agree with that. On the Eagles side, they probably don't stay at just 33% pass in neutral situations, but there's certainly no reason to expect a drastic shift back in the other direction, which is where they were early in the season, and their offense was struggling more than it is right now. So the question, I think, is primarily how does the work get split if Miles Sanders is back this week, as is a possibility. He's been designated to return, has not been added to the active roster yet. Seems to be trending in the right direction. And I mean, Nick Sirianni didn't do anything to help answer the question for us. He called it a good problem to have. I'm sure it's a good problem to have if you're the head coach. It's a really crappy problem to have if you're a fantasy manager.
Yeah, and Sirianni also said that, Sanders is a starter, but different situations and packages might not make it look that way. Meaning, in some games we might see Jordan Howard lead the way, or Kenneth Gainwell get back in there, as the pass catching back. So yeah, and especially in this matchup, the Saints are first in Football Outsiders run defense, DVOA. They're also first in adjusted points allowed to running back. So that makes it, to me, pretty easy to just avoid it. Hopefully we get Sanders back and we see how the work is divvied, then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, I would play both Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson over any Eagles running back in this game.
Me too.
Jordan Howard has played well, though. It hasn't just been a matter of getting touches. He's 17th among all running backs in PFF rushing grade on the season to this point. Not a special player by any means, but it's understandable that the Eagles would say, yeah, we're not just going to toss him back on the practice squad. He'll still be involved.
Yeah, and if Sanders is out, then I think, Howard and Boston Scott become, lower end running back 3 options.
Jalen Hurts, meanwhile, one of the few quarterbacks that you can still say it's fine to start him despite league low pass volume. The rushing is still there. The carries have actually picked up in recent weeks. So he's going to be, a key part of that rushing offense, whether it's from a drop back position or true running plays. The scheme does make Devontae Smith a risk reward play, though, coming off of 2 big fantasy outings.
Yeah, tough matchup here for Philly too, because again, the strength of the Saints D is against the run. So, we'll see if that pushes them a bit more towards the pass. I think Devontae Smith is a wide receiver 3 right now. He's posting really strong market shares. It's just, again, the passing volume has been so low that it hasn't really led to big raw target totals for Devontae Smith. I kind of expect the same thing this week. But if the Eagles start to get into games where they do fall behind and have to throw more, I think that's going to be good news for Devontae Smith, and you could start seeing him getting 8, 9, 10 targets a game.
Yeah, I would at least shop him this week and see what what kind of price you can get. It's not somebody that I want to get out from in case the bubble bursts and he crashes, but I would bet that he sticks in kind of this 5 to 7 target range the rest of the way, because the Eagles are better off if they're not slinging the ball around too much.
Yeah, I mean, Smith has finished wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 6 the last 2 weeks, so it's never a bad idea to shop someone that's finished as a top 6 wide receiver the last 2 games.
Dallas Goedert, will see if he is ready to play in this game. He is in the concussion protocol, so it's just a matter of whether he has time to make it through.
Yeah, and he didn't practice on Wednesday, so I think in most cases when a guy still isn't practicing on Wednesday, they end up not playing. So I'm not expecting Goddard to play on Sunday. Jack Stoll and Tyree Jackson actually pretty much split routes down the middle after Goddard left last week's game. So that's a situation to avoid.
I can't wait for Tyree Jackson to catch a touchdown in this game, and the one person who played him on DraftKings to go tweeting about it.
Wins the Millie Maker.
Before we get out of this game, I want to mention Quez Watkins as just like a low-level dynasty stash, because he's not going to get to the level, I think, of being useful in redraft for, season-long leagues this year, but he's clearly outperforming Jalen Reagor to this point and earning touches as a result of it. 4.35 speed on Quez Watkins. He's old for like a young player. He's 24 already, had his college breakout at 21. So I'm not saying go trade for him, because there might not be really anything to mine here, but somebody worth sticking low on a dynasty roster, especially because this coaching staff isn't the one that was in place when they drafted Jalen Reagor. So it doesn't have any particular connection with Reagor.
Yeah, Quez Watkins is better than Jalen Reagor. That's the best I can say for him.
Now, I think it's early to give up on Jalen Reagor completely. He's just a year and a half in, was a first round pick, but it's not starting well.
Not looking good.
Yeah. Indianapolis at Buffalo, Bills by 7, over under 50. Carson Wentz had a rough game against the Jaguars. And if you look at just the raw, usual, traditional stats, it looks like his worst game in a while, maybe all season. But according to the Pro Football Focus passing grades, he was worse in week 8 against the Titans and against the 49ers in week 7. And if you group all that together, his 3 worst passing grades of the year have come among the past 4 games.
This freaking Jaguars defense has cost me some money the last 2 weeks, shutting down Josh Allen and then, doing what they did to Carson Wentz last week. I think coming off that performance now on the road against, the best pass defense in the NFL, you're obviously not using Carson Wentz this week if you can help it.
The Josh Allen game was goofy. I think Carson Wentz, it's like, oh, okay, now I need to stop and realize that Carson Wentz has not been as good lately as his touchdown numbers indicate, and rethink my usage on him. Certainly for this game against Buffalo. Otherwise, I think the Indy offense is what we had, the way we treat it every week. Jonathan Taylor's in lineups. Michael Pittman is in most lineups, and there's not a whole lot beyond that.
Yeah, I agree. No, this is the toughest matchup the Colts have faced in a while now. They've really had a string of favorable matchups. So I do think you're downgrading Pittman to more of a wide receiver 3 this week. Jonathan Taylor, he's still in running back 1 territory despite the matchup.
Mm-hmm. And I think that the Bills might still be without Starlo Tulele at defensive tackle. I think it was Sunday last week that he went on the COVID list, and he would be key to that run defense. So it would make that matchup better for Jonathan Taylor. On the Bills side, the Colts are also a better defense than the Bills have faced through most of the season. It's at least the best defense that they've faced since Tennessee in week 7, maybe since Pittsburgh in week 1, depending on the rating system and how they're playing that particular week. The Colts are currently 10th in overall defensive DVOA, also just 23rd against the pass, though, and they've been the 6th best scoring matchup for quarterbacks by our adjusted fantasy points allowed.
Yeah, this Colts defense is good against the run. Football Outsider says them 2nd in run defense, but like you said, 23rd in pass defense. That's not a good formula against the Bills, who don't really want to run it anyways. These 2 teams played in the wild card round last year, and Zach Moss and Devin Singletary combined for 10 carries in that game. The Bills didn't even really try to run I expect a similar game plan here. So I like Josh Allen. I like Stephon Diggs. I think Emmanuel Sanders is still in play, even though his production has tailed off recently. Cole Beasley's the guy I think you can't use. He's been dealing with this rib injury, and he only played 9 snaps last week, and he did not practice again on Wednesday with the rib issue. So even if he's active, I think we need to see Beasley, back in a full-time role before we can trust him.
And the matchup is not a gimme in the slot against the Colts either. So yeah, I agree with trying to back off of Cole Beasley this week. Dawson Knox, though, could be somebody who benefits from the Cole Beasley situation. The Colts are adding 54% to opponent tight end fantasy scores on the year. That's the top matchup for the position.
Yeah, Knox had just 1 target in his return last week, but he ran a pass route on 74% of the dropbacks. That's what we need to see. So yeah, I would feel okay going back to Dawson Knox this week.
Yep, right in that range of funny looking white dudes, ahead of Adam Troutman, but alongside Tyler Conklin and the other crew.
For sure.
Anything else in that game?
Nope.
Detroit at Cleveland, Browns by 11.5, up 1.5 from where it opened. Over under a 43.5, which is down 3. The Lions have the lowest implied team total of the week, 16.25 points. It doesn't help that Jared Goff is iffy for this game with an oblique injury.
I mean, it might not hurt the way Goff's playing. I don't know. Tim Boyle's the backup. I don't know anything about Tim Boyle.
No, Tim Boyle's still on injured reserve. It would be David Blau time, I think.
Well, no. Dan Campbell said Wednesday that Boyle took first team reps in Wednesday's practice. He's been designated to return. So Campbell basically said if Goff's out, it would be Tim Boyle.
Yeah, David Blau is more fun, so I'm not interested now. This whole game, really, I mean, it's just like it's Nick Chubb, it's DeAndre Swift, it's CJ Hawkinson. Even though last week was as bad as it could possibly get for Hawkinson, that one at least followed games of 11, 9, and 11 targets, and it was just the third time all year that he has fallen short of 8 targets.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous that Hawkinson could go 5 quarters worth of football and only get 1 target. I expect this is a situation where the Lions are like, okay, let's get him a bunch of targets early on to fix that. So you're going back to Hawkinson. Swift, obviously, although it does look like Jamal Williams is trending towards returning this week. So that you're not going to get another 33 carries out of Swift this week. You're still starting him. On the Brown side, I mean, Baker Mayfield is just so beat up. He has the knee injury he suffered last week. He was on the injury report coming into last week's game with a foot issue. He still has the left shoulder injury that he's been playing through. I would expect the Browns to just run the ball as much as possible in this game. So I don't really like any pieces of this Browns passing game.
I like to imagine film sessions being like they were in high school football for games like this. And if in that case, it would have been a fun week to be on the Lions defense and have the coaches yelling at Jared Goff and the offense every single time something happened. Where they're like, you see this big guy here with the hair coming halfway down to his butt. You threw the ball to him 11 times last week. You throw it to him none. Where are you throwing it? Khalif Raymond? Come on, Jared. We expect more out of you.
Football doesn't have to be hard, just throw it to your best players.
That's right. Anything else in that game? Please say no.
No, I do. You have to keep an eye on Nick Chubb, though, because he's still on the COVID list as of Thursday. So obviously Dearness Johnson is an RB1 if Chubb does not make it back for Sunday.
Yep. Although John Kelly's off the COVID list now, as Ian Rappaport said, it's a step in the right direction. I'm not sure for whom, but we'll see who exactly is available. Washington at Carolina, Panthers by 3.5. It's up 1.5 from where it opened, and over under 43. Washington's 29-point outburst against Tampa followed games of 10, 10, and 13. So it's definitely easier to play Antonio Gibson this week than it was last week or the previous month. But not much else changes for me on this Washington offense.
No, it's Gibson and Terry McLaurin. We'll see what's available at tight end. Logan Thomas still isn't practicing. Ricky Seals-Jones did not practice on Wednesday after hurting his hip last week. So I'm not sure either of those guys are going to be available on Sunday.
Sammis Reyes week.
Oh, they got John Bates. Remember, they took John Bates in the 4th round of the draft. He was actually the guy that stepped in as the lead tight end last week. So
I'm not sure Sammis Reyes is a real guy. I think it's just somebody that
I've seen him out there. I've seen him in the flesh.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a person, but I'm not sure that it's not an actor playing Sammis Reyes, and that rather than somebody who's actually going to be a tight end in the NFL at some point. We'll see. It'll be interesting, however it plays out. But Taylor Heineke has not reached 250 passing yards in a game since week 4. So I'm not betting on anything here, no matter what its name is. Carolina side, the Panthers, it's tough to say whether they're being coy or they're just not sure if Cam Newton's going to know the offense enough in time, but it sure seems like he's the better bet than PJ Walker to start this game on Sunday. Either way, I expect it to be a limited offense, and Cam Newton's a TD reliant guy. So, I mean, it's going to be easy to kind of get excited after he scored 2 touchdowns on 4 plays last week. He's stashable as a fantasy QB, but I would certainly rather not use Cam Newton in 1 QB leagues this week.
No, not in 1 quarterback leagues. I do think in DFS, I know he's cheap on DraftKings, so he'll be worth looking at there. And in 2 quarterback superflex leagues, I mean, Newton's one guy where a limited offense might be good if that just means, he gets 10 to 12 carries. And the matchup is good here too. Washington near the bottom of the league in pass defense, and they're without Chase Young, they're without Montez Sweat. So I mean, it's a defense that struggled even when healthy, and now they're not healthy.
For sure, I think this game's just going to end up being 13-9, though.
Yes, agreed.
Cam Newton for me is like that wide receiver who gets 3 targets, catches 2 of them for 88 yards, scores twice, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to pick him up and think about starting him next week. He's Devery Henderson at quarterback.
I did just add him in an football guys league where I have Jalen Hurts. Hurts has a week 14 bye, and Newton plays the Falcons this week, so he's going to be my week 14 starter.
I was actually looking at Cam Newton as a week 14 backup for Jalen Hurts owners when, talking to somebody else who's a Draft Shark subscriber about backing up Jalen Hurts for just that reason. So yeah, I like that stash. Elsewhere on the Panthers offense, Christian McCaffrey's all the way back, looked at last week. So that's good, certainly for all fantasy owners that have him. I'm going to need to see another week of at least usable stuff from Robbie Anderson before I'm giving him a serious look, though.
Yeah, me too. Cam should be better than the quarterback play the Panthers had been getting. But man, they might just throw it even less than they have been. And they've already been the run heaviest team in the NFL over the last 4 weeks now. So I'm not sure DJ Moore's volume, it might actually decline with Cam under center. So, more I'm starting, not excited about. And then, I'm with you with Robbie Anderson, maybe stash him if he was dropped in your league, but definitely wait and see situation.
I mean, I would hope to not even have to start DJ Moore. Honestly, I think he's Devontae Smith without the touchdown upside.
Yeah, the matchup's so good though. Washington dead last and adjusted points allowed to wide receivers. So that would be what would push me. He's definitely not a must start. Yeah. But I do think he's startable.
I think that yes, I would agree that he's startable. I think the range that he's in it would be a difficult decision for me among DJ Moore, Christian Kirk, Rashad Bateman, and Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I'd use him over all those guys, but that's the tier he belongs in.
Mm-hmm. Anything else from that game?
Nope.
You don't have any Tommy Tremble stuff?
No, nothing on Tremble.
San Francisco at Jacksonville, 49ers by 6.5. It's up 1, over under a 45.5. Jimmy Garoppolo, as much as you guys want Trey Lance to take over at quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo has been sneaky good, especially lately. 3 straight games with passer ratings over 100 and with 2 touchdowns. He only threw 19 passes in the lopsided win over the Rams, but completed 15 of them at 9.6 yards per pass attempt, 70+% completions in 2 straight games. Jimmy Garoppolo is a solid fantasy QB2 for this week and good for the efficiency outlooks of his pass catchers.
Yeah, probably not a coincidence that he's played better now that he has George Kittle back and Brandon Ayuk is ready to be back in a full-time role. Garoppolo first in PFF passing grades over the last 3 weeks. So yeah, he's playing well. The matchup is good. The concern here, it's kind of like the Mac Jones thing. It's like, how much is Garoppolo going to have to throw against Jacksonville? That'd be my concern. But again, he should be efficient when he does drop back. And the Niners have, one of the higher implied totals of the week.
Seems kind of crazy, but Debo, George Kittle, easy plays. And there was nothing worrisome in Brandon Ayuk's week 10. He got 4 targets. That was 21% of Garoppolo's attempts for that game. 3 straight games for Ayuk with at least 88% playing time.
He ran route on every single pass play last week. So the role is still there. This is going to be the case in this low volume passing offense. Now that you have Debo, Ayuk, and Kittle, there's going to be low target game. I mean, Debo Samuel only saw 5 targets last week, and he still had a monster game. His season has just been ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, you're going to have some low volume games for Ayuk in this offense.
Yeah. Eli Mitchell is a question mark here with a finger injury. So we'll see if he plays in this game. If he plays, I think he's an easy RB2 level start. If he doesn't, Jeff Wilson Jr., I wouldn't say easy, but a solid starting option.
Yeah, I'd be starting Wilson if I have him if Mitchell is out. I think, Trey Sermon would be active. Maybe he'd get on the field, but he didn't play a snap last week. It was all Elijah Mitchell and Jeff Wilson. So to me, Wilson is clearly ahead of Trey Sermon, and he'd be the clear carry leader if Mitchell misses this game, and the matchup is good, obviously.
And we've got a question on YouTube right now asking about picking a running back between Wayne Gallman and Jeff Wilson Jr. Of course, Gallman going tonight in the Thursday night game, so you have to make that decision ahead of the Atlanta game. I think even if Cordero Patterson does not play, I'd probably try to wait on Jeff Wilson Jr., figuring I'm not missing anything special with Gallman, even if I have to, just fall back to desperation play if Wilson's not my, not an attractive option by Sunday.
It's definitely Wilson for me, because even if Patterson is out and Elijah Mitchell plays, I would still like Wilson better in that scenario. Wilson got 10 carries last week, even with Mitchell playing that entire game. They ran it like 40 times as a team, but they could do it could be at a similar number this week against Jacksonville. So it would be Wilson over Gallman for me.
Nice. Anything else from that game?
Nope.
Houston at Tennessee, Titans by 10, over under 44.5. The Texans are just busy rejoicing that they're not the lowest implied team total this week. Of course, Detroit behind them there. But there's still nothing to use here besides Brandon Cooks, right?
Yep, exactly.
Tennessee defense is also improving. They're up to 12th in overall DVOA, so only makes the Houston players less attractive. On the Titans offensive side, good spot for Ryan Tannehill, as we kind of alluded to. He's in that mix with guys like Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, kind of good news, bad news for Tannehill since they lost Derrick Henry. The situation neutral pass rate has been up, as we talked about last week. It was up again last week against the Saints. His efficiency has been down, though, just 6.6 yards per attempt over the past 2 weeks after averaging 7.6 yards per attempt over the first day. Maybe it's just a small sample size thing. They have played, the Saints were a tough matchup last week, but it would make sense that, he's going to be less efficient without Henry in there. That said, though, the matchup against Houston, 25th in adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks. I do think Tannehill is in the, streamer mix this week.
Yeah, I also think that they'll probably still limit the passing volume in this game. That I think they'll control along the lines of what the Vegas line says.
Yep, agreed.
And that backfield is just a jumble right now. Deontay Foreman is kind of getting talked about just because people are so running back hungry. He looks the best between him and Adrian Peterson. And that, I think, gives upside that maybe the Titans decide to give him the ball more, but we haven't seen it yet. Last week, Adrian Peterson was still getting more passing down opportunity and goal line opportunity.
Yeah, that's right. Peterson actually led the backfield in pass routes last week. The thing to watch here is Jeremy McNichols is in the concussion protocol. He didn't practice on Wednesday. The team never announced anything after that game, but he's in danger of missing Sunday's game. And if that's the case, then it just becomes a 2-man backfield with Foreman and Peterson. That would make Foreman easier to trust in this plus matchup.
Yeah, and they would still, I think, both be in play, and we would be guessing as to the touch counts between them.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm not chasing one game of Marcus Johnson, though. What about you?
I'm not either. It does look like he's the Julio Jones replacement. The last 2 games Julio has missed, Johnson's been close to a full-time player. So he's that guy if you're desperate. The matchup's good. But tough to count on the Titans supporting anything in the passing game outside of AJ Brown.
Yeah, he did at least do some stuff for the Colts too, back, a couple of years ago at this point before he joined the Titans. So he's certainly not a bad player, and there's upside, just more of like a cheap DFS flyer than somebody I want to trust in my season long lineup.
Yep, I agree.
Cincinnati at Las Vegas, the Bengals by 1, over under 49.5. I think both quarterbacks look good in that low QB1 range that we've alluded to multiple times. Joe Burrow had a bad one at Cleveland his last time out, but it's the first time all season that he did not toss 2 touchdown passes. He still completed 70% of his throws in that game, still threw for 282. Really, I think we'd be looking at it differently if instead of throwing a 100-yard pick 6 to Denzel Ward, he had thrown a touchdown.
Yeah, Burrow had been a top 9 fantasy quarterback in his 3 games before that. The Bengals 6th in situation neutral pass rate over the last 4 weeks. So that, they've done the opposite of the Eagles They went from run heavy early on to they're back to being a pass heavy offense, which is what we saw under Burrow last year before his knee injury. So I kind of expect that to continue. That makes Burrow a lot easier to like.
And which they certainly should be with what they have in that offense,
Yeah.
including Joe Mixon as a good pass catcher.
Yep.
Derek Carr, at the same time, he rebounded from a down game at the Giants. Not a great game against the Chiefs, but 261 and 2 touchdowns in that game. Has had 2 TD passes in 7 of his 9 games this year. The Bengals arrived to this matchup as a friendly scoring spot for quarterbacks, for running backs, for wide receivers, unfriendly to tight ends, but I don't really care for Darren Waller.
And my only concern with Carr is just he hasn't been very good these last 2 weeks without Henry Ruggs. Everything is down for him. The average depth of throw is down. His yards per attempt is down. His PFF passing grade is down. He's actually 28th in PFF passing grade over the last 2 weeks without Henry Ruggs. But yeah, like you said, this matchup is good. I like this game in general. I mean, these are 2 pass-heavy offenses. The Raiders are 9th in situation-neutral pass rate over the last 4 weeks. So I do think this game has shootout potential. So that puts Carr in play, even though it's kind of the same situation he was in last week against the Chiefs. And yeah, he got there with the late touchdowns, but he didn't play very well in that game.
I think one key difference is we get another week of practice for Deshaun Jackson, who should at least help out with the Henry Ruggs replacement plan. I think the key for him this week will be making sure he doesn't do the spinning bat thing before he goes out onto the field.
Anyone else, I would have been like, "What are you doing?" Deshaun Jackson, I wasn't surprised. Like he has one play that just makes you shake your head every season. It seems like.
If he only has one, then you're doing well with him. That I don't know. I was watching as an Eagles fan. I was watching the game where he dropped the ball before crossing the goal line against the Cowboys. I was more surprised by turning and running. I don't know, trying to run a circle around the defender in that game against the Chiefs.
Yeah.
It's a good spot for Hunter Renfrow, who is already wide receiver 3, might even be a wide receiver 2 this week.
Yeah. I mean, he's finished wide receiver 14 and wide receiver 10 the last 2 weeks. He has seen 22.5% of the Raiders targets in the past 2 games without Henry Ruggs. That leads the team. Good matchup against the Bengals, 25th in adjusted points allowed to wide receivers. So I think Renfrow is a wide receiver 2 in PPR this week.
Josh Jacobs also in a good spot. And I'm just going to go back to forgetting that Kenyon Drake exists.
Yeah. Drake is averaging 3.5 carries in games with a healthy Jacobs this season. He had 1 big target game among those 4 or 5. The rest, he's been 1 to 3 targets. So he's not usable.
Yes. And the Raiders, meanwhile, have been a terrific scoring matchup for running backs and tight ends. Obviously, we're playing Joe Mixon, and we're happy that he's back from a bye. CJ Uzomah is a sneaky option this week. Only the Eagles have allowed more receptions or yards per game to tight ends than the Raiders have, and it's just barely on the yardage front.
Yeah, I like the matchup. Again, I like that. I expect this to be a high-scoring game. Uzomah's just so thin because of the targets. I mean, 3, 4, and 5 targets over his last 4 games. It's tough for him to earn targets when you're competing with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and even Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, if you're looking down in tight end 15 range, then I think Uzomah has upside versus those guys. I'm playing him over somebody like Adam Troutman. I
like Uzomah as a DFS tournament play where he could pop for 2 touchdowns if this turns into a shootout.
Oh yeah, baby. And he'll do it from far away, unlike Ty Conklin with 2 touchdowns on 11 yards last week.
Hey, they're all touchdowns. They all count the same.
No, they don't. With Uzomah, it's going to be 2 touchdowns for 78 yards.
Okay.
Arizona at Seattle. Cardinals by 2.5. Opened as Seahawks by 2. So a big change here. Over under 48.5. And one thing that's changed is Kyler Murray practiced Wednesday.
Well, he practiced Friday last week too. Before missing that game. The Cardinals do have a bye coming up soon. That's the only kind of complicating factor here. Cliff Kingsbury on Wednesday was still non-committal on Kyler's status. So, I think we're not going to know until Friday at the earliest, and he might end up a game time decision again.
I mean, you certainly should be non-committal. I don't know why a coach would commit to anything on a Wednesday when it doesn't even behoove them to commit to things right when the game is happening. So we'll see about Kyler Murray. I certainly think it's encouraging that he's practicing on a Wednesday. DeAndre Hopkins not practicing on a Wednesday. So we'll see about him.
Yeah, I would not expect Hopkins to play. Hopefully coming off the bye, he'll be ready. The wide receiver core last week, you had Antoine Wesley replaced DeAndre Hopkins in the starting lineup. So you had Wesley and AJ Green on the outside with Christian Kirk back in the slot, which is definitely where Arizona prefers Christian Kirk. And then Rondale Moore is just the 4th wide receiver. So Moore is not usable. You're not using Antoine Wesley. Christian Kirk is the best play in this wide receiver core. He's been productive really over the last 5 games now. He has 4 top 36 finishes over the past 5 weeks. And also the Seahawks, where they struggle in pass defense, is against the slot, which is, again, where Kirk should be playing this week if the Cardinals go with the same, wide receiver rotation they used last week.
Yeah, Kirk, a fairly easy start in 3 wide receiver leagues in play, even if you only have to start 2 wideouts. AJ Green's on the fringe. Rondale Moore is going to be good at some point, and Andy Isabella is starting a support group with JJ Arcega-Whiteside.
Yeah, so sad.
Positive matchup for Zach Ertz. Okay role for him, though. So he's kind of in that mix of tight ends that we talked about before, where you're flipping a coin because it's just who happens to get a touchdown look, an end zone target in that group. The role is fine. It would certainly help Ertz if Kyler Murray is playing in this game.
Right. Ertz's route rates have been strong, and they've increased the past. He was at 54% in his Cardinals debut, but then he's been 70%, 84%, and 81%. So those are nice numbers. I do agree he needs Kyler Murray back to be someone we can trust, but I don't know. Ertz might be a guy to go out and trade for this week if you're hurting at tight ends. I do think he could be useful once the Cardinals get Kyler back.
I would say that if Zach Ertz is a trade target for you this week, then your team is in pretty good shape.
Yeah, exactly. He put you over the top. Zach Ertz brings you to the championship.
I'm not sure, even if Kyler Murray does play this week, I'm not sure that Zach Ertz would jump over Dawson Knox, Pat Freiermuth, Cole Kmet, or Tyler Conklin, which are the guys listed directly in front of him right now in our PPR rankings.
Yeah, our rankings right now assume Kyler Murray is going to play. So, those guys might all drop a little bit if it ends up being Colt McCoy or Chris Streveler, I guess, because McCoy got hurt last week too. So we'll have to see about the Cardinals quarterback situation.
On the Seahawks side, terrible return game for Russell Wilson. Now, are we giving him a mulligan here, Jared?
No, because I think it was because of the finger injury. Man, and he was horrible. Worst game I've seen him play. He was dead last among quarterbacks in PFF passing grade, and a tough matchup here too against Arizona. 5th in adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks. So if you can, I would try not to use Russell Wilson this week. Make him show us he's healthy, and then you can get him back in your lineup.
He's sitting 15th in our quarterback rankings right now. I'd have a hard time starting him over Jimmy Garoppolo this week.
Feels gross, but it would not be crazy.
It's one of those things where you got to cover up the names. If you say out loud, I'm going to start Jimmy Garoppolo over Russell Wilson, that's terrible. But if you look at all of the factors, it's it really makes more sense to go ahead and play Garoppolo. He's the safer bet.
Yeah, and again, if it was just Russ coming off a random bad game, I wouldn't be worried. But I find it hard to believe that the finger wasn't an issue last week, and we don't know, if it's going to be less, how much less of an issue it's going to be this week.
Mm-hmm. There's still plenty of start your studs out there. I think Russell Wilson, overall, for his career, counts as a stud. Right now, in his current situation for this season, doesn't count as a stud.
Yeah, it's different when you're quarterback dealing with an injury to your throwing finger.
Right. I'm definitely giving his wide receivers a mulligan where it makes sense. I'm not, they're not both top 14 or anything for me, but I'm more willing to take another shot on DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett than I am to use Russell Wilson this week.
Yeah, Metcalf has been horrible against Arizona. Now that those previous games all came with Patrick Peterson, so maybe that's the explanation. But worth noting. And Tyler Lockett, of course, his 200-yard 3-touchdown game came against the Cardinals last year. He had 9 catches for 67 yards and a score in the other game. So maybe DFS purposes, you might lean toward Lockett this week. But I do think they're both starters in season-long leagues.
Should we believe in what we saw from Gerald Everett last week?
Sort of. I mean, I don't think he's going to lead the team in catches every week. I think that was probably a product of Russ not being able or wanting to throw downfield. It was just a lot of short stuff to Gerald Everett. Everett's playing time has been strong really the past couple games now. He did miss practice on Wednesday with, I think it was a hamstring. It was some soft issue. So that's worth watching if you're hoping to use Everett this week.
That is how Gerald Everett always responds to a big game, is he's not practicing Wednesday because something's wrong. And then he's probably not playing the following Sunday just to give us enough time to forget about what he just did. Right. Alex Collins, speaking of forgetting, Chris Carson is still not progressing as we had hoped if we're talking in Pete Carroll's voice. So Alex Collins, if his groin is fine, looks like he'll keep the backfield lead.
Yeah, and this was down to a 2-man backfield last week. Rashad Penny and DJ Dallas didn't play a single snap. Now, Carroll said earlier this week that he was hoping to get Penny in there. I don't know if you're hoping, he could have just done it. So I wouldn't be surprised if Penny gets back involved this week. But it does look like Collins continues to be the lead ball carrier. He's not doing a lot in the passing game, so I think that kind of keeps Collins in the running back 3 group.
Yeah, Pete Carroll's just a hopeful guy. That's what he says. But Rashad Penny has done nothing to force his way into that backfield at any point. So I'm not buying it. Dallas at Kansas City. And finally, the centerpiece game of this week. The Chiefs by 2.5, over under 56. And I mean, you just play them all. Play everybody from this game.
Yeah, so a couple notes I have. Amari Cooper put in a full practice on Wednesday for the first time since week 8. He also had his highest route rate last week in a while. So he looks to be getting healthy. Good timing here with this Chiefs game coming up. Michael Gallup played. He was in a route on 55% of the dropbacks last week. Seems like a low number, but they pulled starters late in that game. So Gallup seemed to be back in something close to a full-time role. So I think Michael Gallup is in play this week too, just because we expect so many points in this game.
Even left tackle Tyron Smith is back to a limited practice Wednesday, so Dallas is getting healthier there as well. On the Chiefs side, what about Clyde Edwards-Helaire? What's the latest on him?
Yeah, we don't know. Andy Reid said Wednesday they might be this week, but they might decide to hold him out one more week. So, by Saturday at 4 is the deadline for them to activate CEH if he's going to play. So we'll know by then. If he's in, my guess is that Edwards-Helaire will return to the lead role. He was already seeding some passing game work and most of the goal line stuff to Darrell Williams before his injury. Maybe he seeds a bit more after. So I wouldn't be super excited about CEH, but I do think if you own Edwards-Helaire and Williams and they both play this week, I think Edwards-Helaire is the better fantasy bet.
Yeah, but one of those situations where you wouldn't be shocked if Williams outscored him. So kind of hope, if you do have both, you kind of hope that they hold out CEH until he's fully healthy, and then maybe we get more of an idea of what he's going to get.
Yeah, because Darrell Williams is he's getting RB1 usage with Edwards-Helaire out, so he's a locked-in starter if Edwards-Helaire does not play again this week.
Anything else from that game?
Nope.
Pittsburgh at the Chargers on Sunday night. Chargers by 5.5, up 2.5 from where it opened, over under 47. And we're going to have to see about Ben Roethlisberger's chances of making it off the COVID list. Mike Tomlin says they'll, quote, build our plan around Mason Rudolph playing, but, quote, leave the light on for Ben Roethlisberger. So if he makes it off the COVID list in time, he'll be the starter, but we don't know.
Yeah, and Big Ben is washed up. But after watching Mason Rudolph last week, Big Ben is much better for this offense. Mason Rudolph was just a complete disaster. He averaged 4.8 yards per pass attempt against the Lions. So if you're hoping to use Deontay Johnson or Pat Freiermuth, you're definitely hoping that Big Ben comes off the COVID list by Sunday night.
Yeah, Roethlisberger's washed up, but Mason Rudolph is the kind of dirty that doesn't come off. So Najee Harris, Deontay Johnson, Pat Freiermuth, either way, good matchup for Freiermuth. So let's hope that the better quarterback is in there. 6+ targets, 60% plus playing time in 4 straight games for him. Yeah,
his playing time did come down with Eric Ebron back last week. But he still saw 9 targets, and we can't be too picky at tight end. Until the targets stop coming for Freiermuth, he's a starter.
All right. On the Chargers side, nothing sneaky as far as I can see. Jared Cook remains a TD or bust option. I think the biggest Chargers question right now is whether to keep rolling with Mike Williams. My answer would be probably yes, obviously depending on the options. But I wonder if week 10 showed us the Chargers trying to get him more involved, because since week 4, his ADOT had been up from where it was through the first 3 games. But last week, they started throwing him short stuff. All 6 of Mike Williams' official targets in that game against the Vikings came in the short range. He had a 7th target that got wiped out by a pass interference penalty, but that one went deep and he drew a pass interference on it. So it would make sense for the Chargers, who have not been as good overall on offense as they were early in the season when Williams was delivering. It would make sense for them to get him more involved and find ways to make that happen.
It would make sense. This whole offense has gotten more conservative since the bye week. They had that total disaster against the Ravens, then they went on bye, and since then they're passing less. Their situation neutral pass rate is down from 61% to 54.5%, and Justin Herbert's average depth of throw is down too, from 7.9 yards to just 6.7. So the passing game is kind of being hamstrung now by the play calling. So hopefully that changes. Yeah, I would stick with Williams in most cases. I mean, the usage just hasn't been good though. He's 69th among wide receivers in expected fantasy points over the last 4 weeks now. So it's not like he's just been inefficient on strong usage. The usage just hasn't been there lately. I'm gonna count on the Chargers changing that because I think they need to get the offense going again. But Williams definitely comes with risk as we've seen the past few games now.
Yeah, I think Williams looks similar to Devontae Smith for me in that the target count isn't where you want it to be, but there's boom potential if he gets it. And I would be playing Mike Williams over DJ Moore across formats.
Yeah, lots of injuries on the Steelers defense here too. TJ Watt, he looks iffy. Minka Fitzpatrick, he's on the COVID list, right? And then Joe Hayden is hurt as well. So, three starters on this defense might be out on Sunday night.
Mm-hmm. Anything else from that game?
Nope.
New York Giants at Tampa Bay to round us out on Monday night. The Bucks by 10.5 or 11, depending on where you look, down a little bit from where it opened. Over under of 49.5. Taylor Heineke and Antonio Gibson in week 10 really gave hope to whatever you're hoping to get from any Giants this week. But again, as usual with the Giants, it's going to start with injuries. We don't have any official reports from practice yet as of this recording because it's Thursday midday here and it's the Monday night game. So they start with Thursday reports. Doesn't sound like Sterling Shepard is opening the week in a hopeful vein, still working off to the side Wednesday, according to reporters.
Yeah, I don't expect Shepard to play. Kadarius Toney, Kenny Galladay, and Darius Slayton, they were all healthy for the game before the bye. So those are probably be your top 3 receivers on Monday night. I don't like this spot at all for the Giants offense, the passing game in particular. The Bucks are blitz heavy defense. Daniel Jones does not do well against the blitz. He's 27th in PFF passing grade when blitzed this season. So I'm not excited to use any pieces of the Giants passing game. But we'll see exactly how the routes and the targets are divvied between the wide receivers. But I mean, Kadarius Toney has been disappointing the past couple times out. I'm not sure if it's been because of injuries. He should be healthier now. But Kadarius Toney and Galladay, they'd be wait and see guys for me this week if I can help it.
And all 3 of those wide receivers played exactly the same number of snaps the last time out. So I would have to assume that they stick with a similar 3 wide out alignment this week against the defense that every offense goes pass heavy against. But, it's tough to guess who's going to get targets, especially because last time we saw them on the field, we only got 20 pass attempts from Daniel Jones. So we don't really have a whole lot to judge from that game.
Yeah, it does look like Saquon Barkley is going to be back this week. Obviously not an ideal matchup. The Bucs are going to be without Vita Vea, though. They're big, run clogger in the middle of that defense. And the Bucs have also been susceptible to pass catching running backs. They've allowed the 9th most running back catches. So, if Barkley's in there, I'd probably consider him like an RB2 this week in the first game off the injury in a, unfavorable matchup. But I think, in most cases, you're starting an active Saquon.
Yeah. And I mean, it would certainly make sense to use him in the passing game as a way to counteract that blitz. So obviously Saquon Barkley doesn't really need a case made for him if he's active most of the time. Feels worth mentioning that Evan Engram has played his 2 highest snap shares of the season the past 2 games. 82% last time out, just 4 and 3 targets in those 2 games, though. I'm convinced that Jason Garrett's wife is too big a fan of Evan Engram, and that's how he's, getting back at that. But, maybe this is a game where he makes some sense to counteract the blitz. I don't know. If we get more pass volume, it's entirely possible we get twice as many pass attempts in this game as we got the last time the Giants played. So, if you're looking down in tight end 2 range, I think there's at least potential for some target upside for Evan Engram, although it's probably going to go to Kyle Rudolph.
Yeah, well, Ingram's finished tight end 14, tight end 8, and tight end 8 in his last 3 games. So he's been producing. The Bucs are kind of below average in adjusted points allowed to tight ends. They're 19th in Football Outsiders tight end coverage ranking. So Ingram's okay. I'm happy to just have him in some best balls. He'll help me on occasion, but I don't feel good about starting him in any given week in a lineup setting league.
Yeah, it's certainly best to not have to decide to put him in any lineups. On the other side, the Bucs are the only team implied, the only team currently implied for 30 plus points on the week. So let's just go ahead and ignore what happened against Washington last week and hope for no Sleepy Tom in the Monday night game.
Oh, Sleepy Tom's back. That's right. I'm at least on Tom Brady watch here. His 4 worst PFF passing grades of the season have come over the last 4 games now. He's 17th among quarterbacks in PFF passing grade over that span. Now, most of that has come without Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski, which obviously hurts. And we don't know about those guys. Brown was on the practice field today on Thursday. We don't have the official practice report yet, but it seems like he's at least getting close, if not back this week. I'm not sure about Rob Gronkowski yet, but I'm at least watching. You know, Brady is what is he, 50 years old now? So like one of these years he's going to tail off. So we'll see.
Yeah, let's hope he's not yet Sleepy Tom permanently, but yeah, it will be worth watching. Chris Godwin, by the way, last week we were wondering about the foot, played his normal level.
Yeah. He did, yeah. Normal level, target share was there, so we don't have to worry about that. And then, you know, again, we'll see about Antonio Brown. Tyler Johnson is knocked off the fantasy radar if Brown is back this week.
Mm-hmm. Now let's close it out with one quick question, because we've got from YouTube a question. With these wideouts in PPR, you got to sit one of these four: Mike Williams, Tyler Lockett, T. Higgins, and Hunter Renfrow. Who are you sitting, Jared?
So it seems crazy to say, but Higgins and Renfrow are in for me. You know, Higgins is my top guy. Renfrow is just so much safer than Williams and Lockett. I think I'd sit Lockett just after what I saw from Russ last week. I don't know if he's ready with that finger. So I think Lockett would be my bench there.
I definitely agree with the decision being down to Williams versus Lockett. I think from there it's a coin flip, because I don't know if Mike Williams is going to get any more targets. I don't know if Russell Wilson is going to be an NFL caliber quarterback this week. And I mean, I'd be lying if I said I knew either of those things. So coin toss between those two guys. Both of them have plenty of upside and downside risk this week, but I agree with playing Higgins and Hunter Renfrow pretty easily among that group. That's going to do it for this Week 11 preview edition of the podcast. Head over to draftsharks.com now. You can see our full Week 11 rankings to help you finalize all of your lineup decisions. Check the My Teams page. That's where you get the customized lineup recommendations based on all the settings that you enter. You can also find us anytime in the free Draft Sharks Discord. You can find the link to join us there in the description for this podcast, wherever you might be consuming it. For Jared Smola and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaff saying thanks so much for swimming with us.